Welcome to the new Kevin Smith, The Great Witness show. The New Adventures series is. I'm Dean Bell here with Ronald and the special guest, Kevin, who will be sharing his real side experiences with us. Hi, Kevin.
In this real side experience, I would find myself with a group of individuals. The real side always is a reflection of our intent, our attachments and agreements through the consciousness, and where our focus and attention lies. For in reality, everything is an isness. Therefore, everything is instantly that which it is. Only as the consciousness has been developed, the construction of it has a cause-to-effect principle that presents as time phases and sequences of events, results in that which is decided, that which is now in reality, not being the immediate effect of itself. For the simulation is designed exactly according to the consciousness. For the simulation is the consciousness effected, and so it has rather been decided as to this rollout of sequences of events on the physical, of causes to the effects. And yet everything decided begins on the real side, on the other unseen dimensions of creation. Everything ever created began as imagination, then formulated with thought, and will express instantly on these other dimensions according to that which is created through these body vehicles. As such, unless it is decided otherwise, everything will instantly manifest on the real side, as we make our agreements and create the ideas we do, and this would be automatic, as generally we are unconscious of this taking place, as we create the thoughts and emotions we do, as we go through our physical day. But were we to be on the real side, having vacated the consciousness when we sleep, we may very well take the same limitations decided on the physical level with us, and so things can become as laborious to construct as they are on the physical, simply because we assume that the same limitation applies. But any limitation is only according to the consciousness, and when we are on the physical, as our awareness is within the consciousness, these limitations apply, that things take the time to build as they do, with all that has been decided as to how they must be put together, like the buildings of houses, for example. Although stepping aside from the consciousness, with all its physical level effecting limitations, can be learned, and so even on the physical can individuals be beyond any ideas of the consciousness that present the laws of physics, what you can or can't do, and then we would see a similar instant manifestation of ideas as they are in reality, appearing as though, for such individuals, that they were operating as freely as they do on the real side while being on the physical. So really, creational experience is all according to the consciousness and the agreement ideas it contains, and despite a consciousness having developed which has given rise to the physical level, where nothing is instantly as it is, even this can be bypassed, and on the real side we can take all the limitation of the consciousness with us if we so choose. Our simulation is always as we decide it, and we can play with the mechanics of the consciousness, or just learn to sidestep it altogether according to our wants. And so it may take a few moments that it does for effects to show up on the physical. Our ideas are inserted in the consciousness, and all the elements involved come into a conjunction as they work with the decided laws of limitation, of distance and time. If I create an idea contract with another, an agreement, it plays out instantly in reality, but on the physical, the individuals must come into a conjunction, must traverse illusionary distance, and according to the agreement, work within the parameters of the limitations and laws of physics as decided in the consciousness, that the idea contract, the agreement, can become an actuality. And so really the consciousness overall, for the personal self-immersed individual in full agreement with it, it is a constant potentiality of effect scenarios based on the ideas, agreements, and attachments it contains, and on the physical level the various potentialities can then play out over the lifetimes, but on the real side everything of the consciousness clung to, with all its agreements unaddressed and tap lines retained, is all there simultaneously, and although it may take a few moments for the potentiality of effects to feature on the physical, if I have an agreement that I can be alien abducted, say, the alien has the agreement that it can abduct me, but must work through the cause and effect time phases and environmental limitations and distances to do so. But on the real side, this alien can feature at any time of its choosing and play out a role that really I have assigned it, that I have granted it permission to perform. And of the everything that must be present on the real side, that a consciousness comprises of, generally for most, it is that which holds their focus at any given moment, that has their attention, as to what of their consciousness of ideas they experience, with always the potentiality of intrusion from others, based on the extensive agreements to all the individuals that would be present in the consciousness also, and regardless of where we are on our process of awareness, the real side will reveal that which has our attention and what we are focused on now. And so, as we pay attention to the real side, we can determine if we are perhaps over-indulging certain attitudes or non-productive ideas. Generally, if we are over-indulging the personal self, we will be cocooned within the illusions of the personal self ideas, and until we cease indulging the personal self and creating these ideas, we can't step outside of our decided illusions of simulation and can't be shown anything else that would be awareness beneficial, or indeed any assignments we happen to be undertaking. For we rather need to stand in the nowness of our real awareness that we can be shown that which is aside from our cocoons of personal self-illusion. If our overall intent is with the ears, these assignments and activities and real side experiences are all there, as everything is in the reality of the real awareness isness, and ready to be shown to the personal self in whatever order makes the most sense. But until we remove ourselves from our personal self, if we happen to have been over-indulging it, we can't be shown anything other than what we already know, the ideas we are entertaining. And as we have our experiences, we begin to recognize the difference between the personal self-generated illusions and that which is aside from it, that which the guides can reveal to us, and that which the real awareness shows the personal self. For if our intent is with the ears, as everything is what it is now, the simulated rollout, all the experiences to that end are already done and complete, and the personal self is just shown the experiences at any given moment that best benefit awareness and the process of it. And so we will of course encounter individuals within our consciousness of a personal self-illusions arena, as potentially any individual we ever made agreement with can feature, and indeed, as the overall consciousness affects the overall simulator arena, really it is like a large open game where to sit in the personal self-consciousness no one is inaccessible, because you can't have the overall simulator without all the consciousness parts that make it up, and this overall consciousness interconnectedness dictates an overall agreement, foundation contract, whereas with any idea shared, the effects must be shared also. But rather than just have random encounters with individuals in our personal illusions on the real side, as we set our intent with the ears and remove ourselves from the personal self and place ourselves into the real awareness nowness position, the simulated activities are all now in accordance with the real awareness intent, and we will have more so experiences involving individuals that always make sense awareness speaking, in that our awareness becomes more so, and all the various galactic assignments and operations that benefit life overall, we also will be shown. Not such a case of us being denied, but more that we had been denying our view of them, as we sat in our personal illusions, assuming our overall intent is with the ears, for if it isn't, any intent that isn't with the recognition of the ears overall must be personal self-intents and focus, which would automatically have us back in the illusions of the personal self. And even if we did stand aside from it and in the real awareness, if our intent isn't with the ears, then everything that is the simulated rollout to that real is recognition intent isn't there, as we have decided and set an intent elsewhere, and now we would view the simulated experiences in accordance with that other intent instead. And this too can be a good gauge of our intent placement, as even when we stand in the nowness of the real awareness, we can recognize if our simulated experiences reflect an intent placed with the ears, or something different, and if it isn't a real intent, then we ought address and make the necessary intent adjustments, and we can have variations of a personal self and real awareness standing, which as we do, as you might imagine, if it's not one or the other, if it's a mixture of both with various percentages, then the real side experiences may be based on that which makes sense with life, but is interfused with personal self-immersion imagery also, like two movies on the same screen, and in such circumstances we learn which parts to discard and which to pay attention to, as we become familiar with the difference. Ideally, we would want a clear view of the real awareness position afforded experiences, but sometimes we are not always maintaining this position as we deal with and manage the ever-pestering personal self, which will, if we allow it, interject and then add layers of its illusions to the awareness beneficial experience, and then we have to rather tease these out. In this real side experience, as I said, I was with a group of beings. My impressions were that they were of the becoming more aware variety. Impressions that can always be afforded us by a real awareness that to receive we must be standing in the reality of. We can still receive these impressions if we are not entirely standing in the nowness of the real awareness, but it would be the equivalent of tuning in and out of a radio station, and so we lose a percentage of the transmission. And absent of a real awareness that is part of the everything awareness we all are, that is through all consciousness, has access to everything in its reality, and so can provide impressions regarding any simulated experience we are involved in or facing, absent of the real awareness standing, and all we have is the personal self, and all that it can determine is what is visually occurring. The personal self will have no additional input as to intentionality of what it is that is transpiring, or any detail other than what is happening moment by moment. No background information that sometimes is essential to understanding what's going on. For sometimes it's like entering a movie halfway through and trying to figure out what's happening, but the real awareness then affords details of that which the personal self didn't see the simulation of, leading up to the point we entered the movie theatre. For indeed, the background provided can be extensive. Sometimes I have received details spanning eons regarding the history of aliens I find myself in the company of, when it's necessary to know such, if it affords the personal self greater understanding of the situation. This group and I seemed to be gathered in a gloomy realm or setting. We also were in the presence of an individual with a great awareness, possibly a guide, but more so a guide entrusted individual who had a greater awareness than the group and I, and was rather facilitating our ability to alter our body vehicle forms. It rather reminded me of a number of real side experiences I had shared, whereas we continue on with our awareness process to endure better the continued stress and struggle of the physical, a deteriorating physical, as it invariably seems to be becoming, based on agreement that various possibilities were being offered that would be an aid to better survival. For to continue on as long as we can on the physical, with the human body vehicle being somewhat delicate, and certainly will be struggling ever more so in a rapidly deteriorating world of escalating pollution and poison, etc., So these real side experiences revealed alternative options pertaining to the assumption of new body vehicles. Everything from robotic mechanical vehicles to organic biological ones, but all options far hardier and more robust than the human biological body. And this real side experience seemed to be a similar situation. For if it were just a real side experience or assignment beyond the physical, such abilities wouldn't need to be learned or facilitated. For as we stand in the real awareness on the real side, everything required to carry out our activities is afforded, including the assumption of alternative vehicles where necessary, and indeed with recognition of how everything on the real side is by thought and imagination, and instantly so, our inability to alter form is simply a limitation we have placed on ourselves. And so, any practice of anything really would be, I suggest, in regards to physical level activity and survival. And as I said earlier, if the consciousness can be learned to be bypassed and the ethereal utilized, then our simulation on the physical can become as instantly malleable as it is on the real side. Or perhaps, if it isn't an ethereal accessing and utilizing, it may be adjustments to the very consciousness that then facilitate these abilities. For if I can't change my form on the physical, there is an agreement idea installed in the consciousness that dictates this limitation. Just a case really then of changing the idea program to one where this now can be so, and we can do this ourselves, as our consciousness is as we decide it. But we also can extend agreement that others can assist us in doing so. The guides or other entrusted awareness beings, such as this individual here in our group, if, say, the adjustments require the extra capability that those more aware can afford. And it wasn't entirely understandable to my personal self as to what was taking place, but the aware individual was performing some kind of alteration that culminated in our human body vehicle skins, as the group were all in human form, rather peeling from us, almost unzipping like overcoats. And as our outer human forms fell away, what was revealed were all manner of very robust and sturdy looking body types, rather difficult to describe with what current references my personal self has available, but my impression overall was that they would afford the group far greater durability on the physical level. And perhaps then, what transpired next suggested at what point these body forms, or others like them, that might be assumed at what point they became a necessity on Earth. For as I also have shared before on real side experiences, is the potentiality of the robotization of the human race through the nanotech contained in the body vehicles, through the various delivery systems that the nanotech can enter the body, the vaccines, etc. This is more or less an inevitable situation now. The agreements are such that this overall human experience of robotization is rather on automatic pilot, and so the best we can do is afford ourselves better survivability should we remain on the Earth, and as we then have to deal with this fastly advancing overall human experience. Perhaps these body form alternatives will mitigate this robotization process, or nullify the nanos, or if the body form can be changed, it makes sense that it would be changed and be then absent of the nanos also. But also there is a phase of this mass human robotization process where it's as though there are a few moments between the activation of the 5G, which will begin the conversion process, and the point where robotization is complete, and all consciousness then is connected with a technology and indeed controlled through it. But in these few moments, it seems as though it takes time for the consciousness intermeshing with the technology to stabilize, and until that point, all humans on this process become as shuffling, deranged, and mindless zombies, not dissimilar to the zombies and their preferred behavior as depicted in the movies, which is no accident, as always we are shown what is to be, or what the controllers would like to be, through the movies, etc., where the zombified masses, before the robotization process is complete, resort to very base drives and have a proclivity to want to attack, maim, and kill. And as we were assuming these new body types in this experience, we all would have an overview, an overlap of situations on the physical, as indeed this very robotization process had begun, and the humans were entering this zombie phase of the process. The impressions then were that this would be the time where it's most likely we would take on such alternative body types, that these adjustments on the real side were facilitating, that when this situation occurs, all those on their awareness process would be able to survive this situation. Also, what occurs on the physical is one thing, but how it transpires and appears on the real side can be somewhat different. We would be shown the view of various individuals as they entered this zombie phase, and it would look however it does on the physical, but on the real side, the skin of the inflicted would turn grey. This greyness would begin with the face and spread throughout the body, and the eyes would go black. For the consciousness of an individual will express throughout their multi-dimensional nature in the various ways that it will, the real side always showing individuals as they are now according to the consciousness as it currently stands. And so, even though we might surmise these glimpses of individual zombification were a future view, these individuals are in reality this way already. For this is the ramification, culmination of agreements as they stand in their consciousness. They are effectively robotic zombies already. Our consciousness, our agreements, will not only reveal our body types effected from such as they are now on the real side, but our positioning in life also. An individual will already be positioned according to their choices, but still must plod through their physical level cause and effect movie simulation to reach the position they in actuality are already at, and on a transition will find themselves. For not only were the zombified masses turning grey and going black of eye, looking very demonic then appearance-wise, but also were then automatically placed in a very dark and gloomy, forbidding area of creation that my impressions revealed were the lower astral. So it seems that a consciousness that has agreements that effect one to become a robotized zombie also effects positioning in life as being the lower astral. A testament then to the distorted nature of the overall human consciousness, that this is projecting them into the position in life where only the most twisted, abrasive, and ill-intended find themselves. Unconscious and unaware the vast majority may be, but still the effects of themselves regardless. The mechanics of creation, of decision agreement to effect consequences, work indiscriminately, regardless of how aware individuals are of how creation works or not. And the effects of a consciousness at the point of distortion, where this zombie robotization becomes so, is lower astral positioning, as the controllers, through the agreements they have secured, have dragged the humans literally into hell with them. But the view of the lower astral placement of the humans was curious. All those undergoing the zombie transformation were not at liberty to roam the lower astral as they might any life level, but all were attached high up to huge wooden beams that were planted in the ground. It looked almost like a crucifixion, though they weren't nailed to the beams, just attached to the tops of them, and seemingly oblivious of their situations. For yes, the robotization process is a complete usurping and control of the consciousness, as though someone had removed your ability to operate your own computer, and so you rather just are a bystander in your own consciousness, and your simulation dictated to you, as the mechanics which generate it are outside of your control and activated through the technology you now are intermeshed and connected with. If you had begun your awareness process, you would at least still be able to stand aside from the personal self, regardless of who has control of the mechanics of it. But for those who hadn't made their real awareness connection, they are locked into the consciousness, and however it is activated, whatever is generated through the aspects, the vehicles of it, is their reality, is their thoughts and emotions, is who they are, personal self-wise. A personal self is just the consciousness, and the awareness just experiences the simulation through it. So for a personal self-immersed individual, they now are having their lives lived for them, if externally controlled through technology, but they won't realize this. And this complete control of the individuals being but passengers in their own consciousness, rather expressed here with their lower astral positioning, as they were prone, lifeless, attached to these huge beams and oblivious, their bodies like shells, hoisted up and abandoned. This then is the fate for humanity as it currently stands, if things continue on along these decided lines. Among the masses being attached to these huge beams, I would see some individuals that my personal self recognized from the physical. Those that, of course, would be personal self-immersed, had accepted their vaccinations, and so had effectively decided to be robotized and positioned here like lifeless autons in the lower astral, and who knows if they even can extricate themselves from this predicament. As the lifetimes roll by and they keep returning into new robotic vehicles, assuming the robot bodies even have an expiration date, their consciousness will remain controlled, and a consciousness then, as distorted as it is and maintained to be so, will effect then a constant positioning in the lower astral and in these curious immobilized states of being. I did recognize my mother, Gwen, among those hoisted up on the beams, as yes, she has had her vaccines. She has agreed with her consciousness, and to remain with the personal self. And she, like all humans that do, are to be found here now, in the lower astral, in this predicament. It's just the physical cause and effect rollout that rather catches up simulated wise with our agreements and choices. I would attempt to assist her. I would begin wading through the swampy lower astral ground toward the beam where she was suspended, but the individual, the most aware of the group, who had facilitated our consciousness alteration to allow for body transformation, would place his hand on my shoulder and shake his head. For really, Gwen had decided this for herself, and unless she decides differently, as we always are the deciders of our experience, nothing can be done for her. Even assistance must be agreed to, or it cannot be provided. And so we would depart from this dismal place. Interestingly, where we were stationed was, as my impressions informed me, a kind of threshold point between the lower astral and other areas of creation, and although the creational life levels are separated vibrationally, literally at any rate, one of the features of simulator deterioration when it reaches advanced stages of it is a kind of fraying between these vibrational boundaries. And indeed, it seems that at such stages in simulator decay, that which dwells in the lower astral is able to encroach on other areas of creation that up until now was denied them, including the physical level. Hence all the reference to end times heralding the presence of demons walking the earth evidently accounts of actual experiences of such end simulator moments. And as we stood on this particular dimensional threshold, it was as though all the prone and beam-mounted zombie humans were let down to the ground. They would join all manner of other creatures, demons, entities, and lower astral-based dwellers, and as one overall group would surge toward a kind of rotting doorway that represented an access point to areas beyond the lower astral, maybe the physical. What had brought the zombies back to life is, I would suggest, that their robotization process on the physical was complete. The zombie phase was over, and now their consciousness and its technological connection had stabilized and was being controlled. The robot humans were no longer zombies, no longer absent, shuffling, and directionless, but were a part of a controller Borg-like technological collective, and could be mobilized and activated according to whatever the controllers decided through their technological control of the robot humans. This translated as they being now mobilized on the lower astral, and their inclination was to join all the other lower astral beings, and like a plague, surge onto the physical, perhaps indicating that around the time of the completion of the robotization of humanity will also be the point where this fraying between the life levels becomes so that these demons and entities will surge onto the physical and be amidst all the robotic controlled humans, and very likely be inclined to kill any individual that isn't robotic and controlled at that point. So really, the robotic humans now were on a similar level of life positioning as demons and entities. And as I said, this mass of robot humans and lower astral nasties all surged toward this rotting doorway, their conduit to the physical, possibly, and as they emerged through it, the group and I, in our new body forms, would be waiting. This may represent that we will very likely have to deal with and defend ourselves with our more robust body vehicles, as this scourge of lower astral creatures and attacking robots becomes a physical level actuality, or perhaps this was a real side effort to prevent this from taking place, to disallow these creatures from their encroaching into areas of creation they shouldn't be. But then no one can really be where they shouldn't, as it's all a decision, choice, and cause and effect, and if the circumstances have allowed that this take place, then it is agreement with all involved that this can be so. In other words, free will decided and agreed as to the experience of. Nevertheless, effects can be managed creatively, if it makes sense with life to do so. If it doesn't, then we are rather just embroiling ourselves in the karma of others. But just as individuals can be thrown into the phantom zone, or as on previous experiences I have shared, where effects can be managed in creative ways on a grand scale, which is really just what the individuals have created for themselves, just a variation that is more beneficial, other than what they would have experienced. And perhaps this effort to prevent this lower astral scourge was able to be so, or at least attempted, based on a similar managing of effects, and quite the almighty battle would ensue consequently. We would not be fighting with what are ideas per se. We would be presenting as the effect which these characters had created for themselves, abrasiveness meeting the effects of itself, which are then abrasive situation potentialities. Our group were rather just the deliverance of what they had chosen to experience. I never saw the culmination of what transpired, for the scene would switch, and the group and I would now be in a conference around a large table still in our new, alternative body forms. And if this was a point before what previously transpired, or afterwards, I can't say for certain, from a personal perspective anyway, as everything is now. And so, what of the everything that is in this nowness we are shown is according to what is deemed as the most sense to be revealed to the personal self, and unlike the physical level and the sequential time phase producing a consciousness, on the real side we don't always see everything in a sequence. We were in a discussion about various things, and still in the company of the very aware individual, and of our group there was one I did recognize suddenly, and that was Vesna, for she had resumed her human form, so this perhaps confirmed that this was the galactic group very likely. It numbered about a dozen or so, and the experience would end there.
Well, Kevin, that's a terrific science fiction movie that's all real, so that's really cool. It's a heads up for everybody to really pay attention for those that really want to be a part of this and get through it, because this is what life is now. So your little spiritual path and all your little wisdom and all those little sayings ain't going to do nothing. So again, doesn't matter who your master or guru is. It's all very interesting. It gets very, very real. Yes, thank you, Kevin. That's just terrific. Thank you, thank you.
Okay. On the way, everybody is already robotic due to the programming and the indoctrination that everybody's going through, and they don't even know it. That's the thing, they don't even know it. They think they're awake and aware, but they're aware to their personal self, and that's it, and indoctrination. But this is cool that these bodies, I mean, Dwayne talks about he's not attached to the physical body. We can get other kinds of bodies that are more resilient, stronger. We don't necessarily have to be attached to these physical ones. I mean, awareness is the one that counts, but the body type, it's whatever, it's a facility we use. Going back to the beginning, imagination. Well, Paul Twitchell talked about think, feel, act, how, manifesting things, you think it or imagine it, put some emotion into it, and then do something about it. But the thing is, these days, we have the government and the controllers deciding for us instead of we deciding for ourselves. So they've gotten in this passive habit about letting someone else decide for them. For example, with the COVID, what's good for their health. So that's somewhat troublesome because people are just led down the wrong way, and so make your own decisions, make it so that you're seeing that you're deciding yourself, your position, and not, look at that in your five bodies and how you're agreeing to certain things and what you're deciding. So that's part of waking up. And you talked about everything, everything we think or imagine somewhere down the line, whether it's this lifetime or down the line, down the stretch, other lifetimes, it's going to manifest every little thought if we keep in this creation bubble here in some way or form, depending on how much attention you put on it. The effect is going to show up, in other words. And that's part of the robotization. Again, they manufacture our dreams and imagination for us. So that's part of the indoctrination here. It's like the stuff we see on TV, in a way, it's very limited, you know, in the media, etc., the movies. There's so much more to it, but our imagination is limited to things like that, books, you know, but whereas even creation is, there's a whole lot more, and especially with our real awareness, there's a whole lot more to it. And it goes beyond imagination, but they have captured our imaginations and hijacked them, our dreams, the American dream, you know, get married, get a job, live happily ever after. What's that? There's a lot more.
The simulator and our creations that will manifest in the future somewhere, somehow. I just want to say that I think that it happens in terms of a clustering effect. It's not like every single reference gets, you know, adopted and or forced, those that we hold on to, but in terms of a cluster effect, meaning that each area you get these groups of ideas, and you know, music, it'll be like certain areas of music, let's say, that a person's more interested in, not all areas of music. You know, could be the blues, or, you know, there's all of that, examples musically of different fusions of styles. But I just mean in terms of this idea that every idea is going to be is going to have to be that next, you know, as part of that next evolution, you know, if you have to call it that, into another lifetime. But I think that's an idea or some point of view that I've been finding with everything that I'm been looking at, environmental or creativity fields, or the sciences, or the mystical, religious, whatever. And that being that to be able to pull it together into a whole, a cognizant whole, is part of what we're doing, because the new UNUU as a whole represents, let's say, as an example, all music and all sound and all voicings, even though sound and music and voicings are three different things. And to have oneself not be divested of our focus points, or directed forcibly, more or less, by the simulated idea reality that we've accepted, or allowed to be, let's, you know, the indoctrination. And so this is certainly an art to doing this. And we called it, remember, we called it the vidya. That was one of the terms for it, but none of the people understood that that term vidya had nothing really to do with particularly lifetime prophecy, like reading Akashic records or something along those lines, metaphysical application, etc. So the vidya was really seeing the is, or recognizing the is. Same thing, another term they used, Unari, for dreams. Again, you got focused on that one specific, and again, these are very valuable references that we're using and acknowledging as but this is the whole art of this sharing. Does that make sense or fit in or have it, did I go off beam or am I with you here like you'd like me to be, I suppose I'd say.
Well, the Vidya and the Nari, I mean, they're still literal. Basically, he created this literalness around these terms and these ideas. It was still not the is. He wasn't going there because it was, again, too soon for people. He just wanted to create something different than what had been created before as a stepping stone to what Dwayne's doing. So these things were still a bunch of restrictions and kind of a, there's a membership, which is a restriction, and kind of you feel good and you're part of the group, and you have somebody kind of telling you things, deciding for you with that spiritual group there. They have guidelines, they have initiations, they're basically deciding for you how things are to be if you're going to wake up to something more. But again, all restrictions. We're at a point now where there's no restrictions. So what does that mean to people? What does that mean to you? I mean, it's your decision now. How are you going to go about this? Your journey, your process. And like Dwayne said, the guides are not here to guide you. They're here to, what do you say? Guide your decision or guide your I think I said your decisions maybe. It's not what you think guide may be, but it's to guide you in a certain way, like you said, Peter, artistically, kind of in a creative way, unique to each individual. It's not like taking your hand to guide you, like Jesus taking your hand and guiding you through the wilderness kind of idea. It's guiding you to make your own decisions. Okay, Kevin?
In this brief experience, I would begin on the real side, and it was as though I received some kind of heads up or warning from my real awareness to my personal self. The sense and impressions received were of some kind of attempt on my personal self vehicle's life, and although not imminent, it was a dark force attack that I would soon become the recipient of, maybe a matter of weeks or even days, as was my impression. So then I would transition from the real side, and my awareness would be between the real side and the physical level, and in such a position, even though with my eyes shut, I can perceive the bedroom I am in, including elements and features that bleed in from the real side also, where my view is simultaneously. I would see almost as though a kind of shape manifest on the door opposite to where I lay, and it was rather hard to describe, but it was as though it was some extension of a technology that was placed and being minutely adjusted so that some beam or other could be trained onto my sleeping body where I lay from wherever the source of this beam stemmed from. I didn't see this beam, but I knew this was what was going to be used. I only saw here the curious morphing shape, and the sense that as it adjusted, it was gradually making it so that this beam, when activated, would hit my physical vehicle. This seemed to be along the lines of a directed energy weapon of a kind, one designed for individual targeting for whatever the reason may be. Mostly when people get hit with such, it is more along the lines of a frequency that induces certain states, from depression to anger to apathy, etc. Of course, they can use them as death rays also. They can match the frequency to that of a specific organ of the body and destroy it. This they commonly utilize to bring about what seems on the surface naturally occurring heart attacks, for example. And indeed, my impression was that this is what they would be targeting, my chest area, and possibly then an assassination through an induced heart attack or heart failure. Interestingly, of late, over the past several months, when I had and originally shared this real side experience around March the 22nd, 2021, my health had been declining. I have been suffering from poor respiration, a difficulty in breathing, etc. And I just wonder if this isn't solely due to the pollution, chemtrails, etc., although of course these would be a contributing factor. Maybe I have been being zapped over these last several months with funny technology to cause the respiratory problems I am currently suffering, but we shall see. I am at least aware of this now, and if perhaps there is agreement somewhere that is facilitating this attack, then it's likely with my intention to remain in creation and do my part. Then any agreements that are affording attack opportunities such as this may be removed, and my elimination made less easy.
Okay, wow, Kevin. Yes, we want you here, and yes, you're doing so very well that yes, they want to get rid of you, don't they? That shows that yeah, you're one of the top guys here, doing a whole lot and kind of disturbing things and bothering them for sure. So again, we need to constantly confront them and have our little talks, don't we? Until they wake up, because they're basically screwed if they don't. That's the bottom line. It only gets worse for them, worse and worse, as they make it worse for others. But yes, we want you here because you're wonderful, and what you're doing is a lot of fun. Look at all the people who are learning. I love to hear you talk, etc. So yes, thank you very much.
And that experience was on the March the 22nd, 2021. That's where my respiratory problems began, I would suggest, and have been continuing ever since.
October, so like 8 months. Well, awareness, like awareness, best defense. It's you're aware of it, so that's huge right there. And then we do have protection from the real guides, but awareness really number one. And you like you say, your agreement or not agreement. So we'll just see. We'll just have to see. We're all being bombarded some way. So this is the world here. So yeah, they've got all kinds of weird technology, and that's what they do. They like create things how to destroy people. That's one of their games. You know?
Well, that's one of the things that the COVID does, gives you heart attacks. You have to be careful with it. But there's probably certain herbs that can help. You could probably take that'll relieve it. But yeah, your awareness is what's going to stop it. It's not going to be anything else. You got to overcome them, and it could be it could come from the physical world. I mean, who knows how much technology these guys got? And if you're a threat to the to the hierarchy, they're going to try do things to you. Maybe you can. I think one of the things that Paul talked about was making yourself surrounded by light or invisible or somehow. Anybody got any thoughts?
I have a share on this. It has to do with the cycles and about the dates that were mentioned, March and 8 months. Now it's 9 months. And I have a very, very interesting cycle reference. And it relates to that. 9 months is a gestation period for birth in the humans. And so there's so many ways I can look at it. I just could say a bunch of things and not really have them be related, because I'd rather, that would be a way of communicating it without trying to present anything like an agenda. And I don't have one, so of course. So let's say, okay, well, what I said in March was that this is a gestation period of the New Ages. And I called it the New Ages, which is the end of the Old Ages, which is the establishment by the Sumerian, Babylonian, whatever historical, you go all the way back, wherever, Lemuria, Atlantis. In any case, this aegis that has been adopted by humans, probably a good bit of it just their genome, DNA code, and the entire references of space gods and religions and all of that other belief, astronomical, astrological, whatever, and it comes up to about 0 AD was a very important orientation of a new period, and this era has come up to this point, which is, I think, reaching its culmination. And there's all kinds of other people would reference it otherwise, the same thing. Doesn't matter. But here I am thinking, okay, not only is that long cycle up to here, but this current one, which is also being born and was born, I think, another way of looking at it was, or a part of the culmination period was back in the 60s, 50s, 70s. That period when there was this movement and also the increase in the alienation, the AI, the computer dynamic, electromagnetic, and etc. The sound of music, the Eckankar, the Paul Twitchell, all of that, the hippie, whatever, 60s, trying to get freedom and liberation, or at least truthfulness for women and the impoverished, the poor, and the black, all the those populations. Also third world countries and their experiences also. not being included properly, etc., or what have you, this integration. Okay, so here we are, and we have all these issues that came to that we were dealing with, let's say the 60s with the environment, and we come up to also the spiritual catechism, and it's one term, or religious catechism and spiritual uh, mishmash, we can call it, and get up to here where Dwayne is exemplifying that, let's say his heart uh, value there spoken of as, experiencing actually the harmfulness to the heart of the whole space here that we're in, people, environment, all of it. And not that he has to take that on and like that, but I can certainly relate that. And I'm going to just go to the final, which is in 1 month, this month, and in particular, because in the astronomical positioning, there is in December, the great attractor is the most potent universal black hole center. That's what they call it, the great attractor. And it's in Sagittarius around the birth dates of people in December 4th. Jeff Bridges comes to mind with that because he is the called the man in his movie Icon. In that movie that he played, is that movie to work with, Val, by the way, for that Reel to Reel. That one is a movie that a lot of people take to heart. I think Robin Williams did some also that was exemplary in this way, where certain individuals are at the crux of things. So, okay. Then the other date, which is also, they're lined up in a series of Fridays from yesterday, which was December 19th, 20th. And that was Joe Biden, president's birthday, right in there. And now there's a series of them that line up, including my own birthday, blah, 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 in December. But up to what I'm saying is that this next month, when the sun lines up, the solar position lines up with the galactic center, which is our local universal black hole, which is okay, that happens once a year, and it has been in the same sign signature since back in 60 AD, actually, to be exact. And it's about a 2100 year cycle. So, okay, this is a major cycle, and I'm just talking about this year, but we are part of something that is like Dwayne saying, something huge, no doubts. And even though it seems like, we're just a little bunch of peons here, so I don't mean to be insulting at all. It's just that. Still, we are with those that are aware. And this presentation makes me think, okay, I'm not saying that any kind of events are going to happen. I do know we have a redirection that happened yesterday, Friday, and that will last, it doesn't matter. I give you all these dates and numbers. It doesn't matter. I'm trying to present that as a relation to maybe part of the congestive heart. And you might look into that, by the way, Dwayne, about congestive heart failure, lack of oxygen. We, in terms of just looking at it, for treatments or whatever way you'd like to. you know, with the oxygenation and oxygen therapy, whatever. Not that I know, only that these differences. And the point is much more, you know, because the population is not listening at hardly any level, and just despite what I'm, you know, for me, myself, my experience also. Not that I want to get personal. It's just, you know, I've put out so much stuff and wrote people in whatever forms, and the amount of responses, it blows my mind that 20,000 people will watch a cat video and I will get 10, 15, just is completely astounding. And I think on the other side of it, we are a dynamic of this real thing, and not talking about presenting some kind of a galactic union with the alien race, or some whatever, you know, with the so-called star people or anything, you know. There was just to finish, there's this astrotheologist. He lives in Mexico. He's pretty close to you guys, to Val, and he says he's doing astrotheology, which means an astrological God, you know, study with Jesus or whatever. And I tried writing him times, same thing, no response. They're always, you know, yeah, all they do is keep putting out what they're doing and saying, and not saying anything. No response, no questions. What is it you're talking about? You know, none of that. Oh, there's other people there in Mexico near you. No, I haven't gotten one word back. Yeah. So maybe that might be something that's going to shift in the next month. That would be interesting, because as an example, I also, the money guy, Elon Musk, I tried a little venue out to him a couple of days ago. I doubt I'm going to receive anything, but my wife sent me something about him because he has Asperger's. And that's interesting, because Asperger's is one of those autism spectrums that allows people at some level to be open to looking at things from, they've got a different view at angle there. And he, you know, so he'll talk about that the aliens are already here, and I don't know how much you've referred to that, but he's also one of the billionaires. So it's not that would be good. It might be not so good to have him come on a board, because he's going to take it in to hand it over to the, you know, who do you call them? The lords? I don't know. What that's way too much, probably. Thank you, Val.
And a part of the awareness thing is doing something, you know, to protect yourself too. We all do what we can in this world that's constantly trying to get rid of us, basically, or control us. So it's a big challenge for all of us, but we do what we can while we're here, and then we move on, you know. You could say move on, but we're always aware somewhere. So while we're here in this dimension, there's a lot to do, and we can take advantage of a lot of opportunities for ourselves to wake up, because this is the place to do it, really. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm actually talking to Dwayne. He's surprised he's still around, because of all the people they've gotten rid of, you know, in the past here, the doctors, the whistleblowers. He's surprised he's still here, but we're here, so let's do what we can.
All right. Keep bugging them.
NUUU.
NUUU.
Professor? Kevin?
You.